Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks so I can take a look at conspiracy theories and talk about their relationship to the Dark Triad Traits and Schizotypy. Now, we talk about conspiracy theories and the belief in conspiracy theories. We know that there's no single agreed upon definition for a conspiracy theory. And this really makes the phenomenon somewhat difficult to study. So looking at two popular definitions, we can kind of see the problem here already. One is, for a conspiracy theory, the unnecessary assumption of conspiracy when other explanations are more probable. Second definition, an unverified and relatively implausible allegation of conspiracy, claiming that the events are the result of a secret plot carried out by a preternaturally sinister and powerful group of people, right? So preternaturally means outside of the natural. It's different than supernatural. So supernatural means an act of God, and preternatural means just outside of nature. So you could have like evil forces that would be preternatural. So either way, we see really the problem here with defining conspiracy theories. As I mentioned, if you look at these two definitions, you see completely different aspects of this construct, right? So if you look at the first definition, that could be almost anybody. An unnecessary assumption of conspiracy when other explanations are more probable. A lot of people do that. With the second definition, that's a much smaller group of people, right? So these people believe in sinister individuals who are out there doing something outside of the natural world that is going to cause damage. Now, of those two definitions, I do like the second one a little bit better. I think it taps into the construct of what we mean by a conspiracy theory a little better. And using a definition like that or similar to that, we see that over 50% of Americans believe in at least one conspiracy theory. So conspiracy theories are fairly popular. Now, there are a lot of different conceptualizations about what predicts the belief in a conspiracy theory. One model is that there are three main factors that predict the belief. There's the existential threat, and this really resonates what we see in conspiracy theory thinking. Conspiracy theories are really never innocent, right? They're always some sort of massive threat to humanity or to a lot of people involved in them. For example, we don't see theories about government officials plotting to make ice cream more available, right? It's always something, again, kind of dangerous. The next factor is sense-making processes. So people who believe in conspiracy theories, sometimes called conspiracists, they believe that their explanation is the most logical. They believe they've applied a logical, reasonable process, and the conclusion that they have come to is in alignment with what other reasonable people should have come to, right? So people are being fooled, but they're not being fooled. So they believe they're logical, and other people are trying to be logical, but again, they don't know the truth. And the third factor is an antagonistic outgroup. Again, so this would be the so-called bad guys, the sinister people that are conspiring with each other. Now, just because somebody believes in a conspiracy doesn't make them a conspiracy theorist, right? So generally, for somebody to be considered a conspiracist, they have to believe in several conspiracy theories, they have to actively endorse the conspiracy theories, and at least one of the theories would often, anyway, involve something bizarre or implausible. So this really gets into a comparison within conspiracists, so kind of regular and diehard, I guess, and comparing these two groups to what we call conventionalists. So conventionalists are essentially the opposite of a conspiracist. Conventionalists look at situations and say there is a reasonable explanation that does not involve a conspiracy. Although technically, somebody could be a conventionalist and believe that some conspiracies still occur. Remember, we have those different definitions out there for conspiracy theory, so it can get a little bit tricky. So conspiracism is not associated with a lack of knowledge about politics. This is something we hear a lot, like, oh, conspiracy theorists must not understand politics. Actually, research shows that they are just as informed about political facts as conventionalists. In online forums, we see that conspiracists are sometimes painted as more hostile and using more aggressive language. Interestingly, conventionalists tend to be more hostile in online forums at least. People don't always fit clearly into one category or another. This is another problem. Looking at the online forums, we see that some conspiracists will argue for a conspiracy. They'll argue in favor of a conspiracy theory. But that same individual will argue against other conspiracy theories. So in a sense, they're only a conspiracist looking at certain theories. They're a conventionalist looking at other theories. So again, categorization and studying these phenomena, this becomes difficult. So with all this in mind, what really qualifies somebody to be a conspiracist? I think it really comes down to a few different things, but one key part would be passive versus active endorsement. I talked about that, but there is no set rule, so I'll just offer my opinion here. I'm going to provide some examples here of beliefs that are and are not generally related to being an official or diehard, I guess, conspiracy theorist. So first, looking at some beliefs that I think are not associated really with being a true conspiracy theorist. So if somebody believes in high-level corruption, I don't think this is really related to conspiracy theories. Unfortunately, this type of corruption is common, so it doesn't really, in my opinion, qualify as a conspiracy theory. If somebody believes in one conspiracy theory and that person has some sort of connection to that theory, that tends to move, I think, away from being a conspiracy theorist. For example, if somebody owns a car and it breaks down when they are driving to a polling place to cast their vote in an election, they might start to believe that the automotive manufacturers are in a conspiracy against the politician that they are going to vote for. Right? If it's isolated to something that they're connected to and something happened to them directly, that could just be a logical error and not necessarily somebody who really truly believes in a number of conspiracy theories. I think if somebody believes in a conspiracy theory that is technically possible and not bizarre in nature, that could mean they're not really a serious conspiracy theorist. For example, people who believe that the government is spying on citizens. We know this has actually happened. So in some cases, yes, it's a conspiracy theory, but in other cases, it's true. Believing in a political conspiracy theory only. So if somebody believes that their political party lost an election because of a conspiracy by the other party, this is actually remarkably common. We see this after many, many elections. So I don't think somebody has to be a true conspiracy theorist to believe this. Now, also looking at like non-specificity. So there's this item from an instrument that's used to measure belief in conspiracy theories. And the item says, much of what happens in the world today is decided by a small and secretive group of individuals. Well, that's not really specific. And we see that over 50% of people endorse this statement. So I don't really associate this, again, with being kind of a diehard conspiracist. And the last one here would be a weak endorsement of or a weak attitude toward a conspiracy theory. So essentially not believing it all the way. So if somebody says that they believe it's more likely than not that there was no moon landing, that's not really committing to the belief. So now moving to the side of the official or diehard conspiracy theorist. What do they believe typically? Well, we see a few different things here. They tend to believe conspiracy theories that were made up by researchers, right? We see papers that talk about this where researchers just completely made up a conspiracy theory. No one believed this conspiracy theory. It wasn't an official one. It wasn't out there anyway. And people who tended to believe in other conspiracy theories believed in it. So that's leading more toward the serious side. We see believing in conspiracy theories that are mutually contradictory, right? I've seen this many times. For example, somebody who believes that lizard people are in control of the government and Hollywood, but there's also a secret society who's in control of the government and Hollywood. Well, you can't have the lizards and the humans both in control, right? Somebody's got to be in control. Somebody has to be in charge. So those are really contradictory. It's either the lizards or the humans, right? And again, I've seen many people actually who believe in both. And when kind of confronted about the inconsistency, typically they can't offer really much of an explanation there. So they're kind of missing the fact that they're contradictory. Now, another one here would be believing in conspiracy theories that have bizarre content. So the government is hiding evidence that there are aliens walking around the planet, or the earth is flat, or something that has kind of a magical thinking, bizarre element. And I'll talk about that in a moment when I get to schizotypy. So I think that's more on the diehard side. And the last one I'll list here would be the belief did not originate from a rational evaluation of evidence related specifically to conspiracy theories in which the person believes. Rather, we see a general tendency to believe in conspiracy theories. Now, this concept is called conspiracist ideation, and sometimes it's called conspiratorial thinking. It's often using this element that conspiracy theories are studied, right? People who kind of invest in this particular thinking, they tend to believe in several conspiracy theories, not really rationally evaluating evidence. So many people think of conspiracy theories as relatively harmless, and some appear to be. Like if somebody believes that there was no moon landing, that's not necessarily obviously destructive. Others, however, are fairly destructive. For example, declining vaccination rates have been attributed to vaccination-related conspiracy beliefs. Also, belief in conspiracy theories can lead to social and political disengagement. So it might be bad for society for a lot of people to believe in conspiracy theories, but it's also bad for the individual who believes in the conspiracy theories. Now, belief in conspiracy theories is related to paranoia, low trust, receptivity to unusual beliefs, schizotypy, belief in the paranormal, although this relationship is actually fairly weak, high openness to experience, and low agreeableness. And these have been contested as well. Now, looking specifically at low agreeableness, this leads us to the idea of the Dark Triad Traits, because low agreeableness is common to all three of those traits: narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. So this kind of leads me specifically to answering the question about conspiracy theorists and schizotypy and Dark Triad Traits. Now, I used several articles to help make this video, and one specific article really looked at the question of schizotypy and the Dark Triad Traits. I'll put the references for all the articles in the description for this video. But in this one article, again specifically looking at this topic, we see they performed a regression using odd beliefs and magical thinking from schizotypy, and also narcissism, both grandiose and vulnerable, psychopathy, both primary and secondary, and Machiavellianism. So all these variables were loaded in the regression as predictor variables, and the outcome variable was conspiracy theory beliefs. So they wanted to see kind of what the contribution was of all these variables to having conspiracy theory beliefs. What was the variance that each of these predictor variables explained in conspiracy theory beliefs? And what we see here is that 55% of the variance of conspiracy theory beliefs were explained by odd thinking, magical beliefs, Machiavellianism, and primary psychopathy. So these are really interesting findings. That's quite a bit of variance, and it's interesting in terms of what explained the variance, but it's also interesting in terms of what didn't explain a statistically significant amount of variance. So kind of breaking this down and looking at these, starting with odd thinking and magical beliefs, we see this as one of the characteristics of schizotypy and of schizotypal personality disorder, which is a cluster A personality disorder in the DSM. Now, schizotypy is considered to be kind of on a continuum with schizophrenia. So it goes from paranoid personality traits to schizoid personality traits to schizotypal personality traits, and then moves to schizophrenia. That's kind of how we think of it. So it kind of makes sense that odd thinking and magical beliefs would have kind of this delusional component to them. And we know that these beliefs can be comorbid with delusional thinking. Now, we also see specifically with this item that conspiracy theories may offer a sense of control over the unexplained, right? So somebody has odd thinking, they have magical beliefs, they want to know they have some control over that which they really can't explain, and conspiracy theories kind of fill that gap. They kind of satisfy that need. Now, moving to Machiavellianism, when I was reading this finding, this one really didn't make a lot of sense to me, right? So there's this cynical component with Machiavellianism. Because somebody's cynical, they might believe that other people would be involved in a conspiracy because they might do the same thing if they had a chance to be. They might think of themselves as being one of those government officials who's capable of conducting this type of conspiracy. So I guess cynical kind of connects a little bit. In terms of the strategic and opportunistic components of Machiavellianism, I don't really see how there's much to gain by believing in a conspiracy theory, so these don't seem to line up for me anyway. Now, people who are Machiavellianistic tend to view people as foolish and possibly as being inferior. So it's really easy for them to picture other people as being the victims of a sophisticated government plot, for example. So I guess this component is fairly consistent with this finding. And we see that people who are Machiavellianistic are prone to manipulate others. And because of this tendency, they may be worried about being manipulated themselves. So by believing in a conspiracy theory, they're kind of making a preemptive strike, right? They're reaching out and distrusting people and maybe even trying to manipulate people rather than being the victim of that behavior. Now we move to primary psychopathy. This one I don't really see. I mean, I know the research findings had it connected, but I don't really see the connection here. Maybe it has something to do with the overlap between primary psychopathy and Machiavellianism. So again, seeing people is easy to manipulate. So it makes sense that people in the government would be manipulating others. That's the only thing I can really see that connects. It's hard for me to really see how people who are psychopathic would be too interested in conspiracy theories. So again, I didn't really connect with this one. Now, in terms of the characteristics that aren't related, right? And again, I think these are just as interesting. Secondary psychopathy was not related at all. So people don't believe in conspiracy theories because of something like impulsivity. Now, in terms of narcissism, we see no relationship here between grandiose or vulnerable. Now, prior research has shown that grandiose narcissism was related, but again, this study says it's not. And vulnerable narcissism, I'm not aware of any studies that connect that to conspiracy theory beliefs. So what I find interesting about this, with the secondary psychopathy and both types of narcissism, is this really means that there's no relationship between conspiracy theorists and cluster B personality pathology. We don't see anything connecting to antisocial personality disorder, that would be the secondary psychopathy. Nothing connected to narcissistic personality disorder, that would be the grandiose narcissism. Nothing connected to borderline personality disorder, that would have some connection over to vulnerable narcissism. And of course, we don't see anything with histrionic. Histrionic personality disorder isn't really studied that much, so I'd be surprised if anybody even tried to make the connection in research to even study it in the first place. Now, interestingly, because of that lack of a relationship with vulnerable narcissism, that means that conspiracy theories are probably not connected to cluster C personality pathology either, so avoidant dependent and obsessive compulsive personality disorders. So when we look at conspiracy theorists, we're really looking at potentially cluster A personality pathology, schizotypy, but nothing from cluster B and cluster C. Usually, again, this research is looking at tendencies. So I know whenever I talk about topics like conspiracy theories, there'll be a variety of opinions. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate a really interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found this description of conspiracy theories, schizotypy, and the Dark Triad Traits to be interesting. Thanks for watching.